Hi guys, this is Faiza Abbas, and today I have with me Raegen Pietrucha. Raegen Pietrucha writes, edits, and consults creatively and professionally. Her chapbook, An Animal I Can't Name, won the 2015 Two of Cups press competition. Her debut poetry collection, Head of a Gorgon, is forthcoming with Vegetarian Alcoholic Press in 2022. She has a memoir in progress. She has received her MFA from Bowling Green State University, where she was an assistant editor for Mid American Journal. Her work has been published in Cimarron Review, Puerto de Sol, and other journals. So let's welcome Raegen. Hi, Raegen. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Okay, Raegen. So let me just start. Okay, so when and how did your journey as a writer started?
I think probably I learned how to read at a very young age, and I think that sort of sparked a natural kind of joy and love of stories and storytelling. Um, you know, from my mom reading books to me at night, and then me learning that skill myself, and then I just kind of kept going with it as just as a reader. Um, and then I think it was second grade, somewhere in there. I had a teacher, and she had us make our own books, like write our little stories, and we also illustrated. So we were drawing little doodles and then writing, So I mean, the stories were very, very basic, as you might imagine. Like I had one about a ghost that was scaring people, and then the people were like, "Why are you scaring people?" And then the ghost was like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that was like a bad thing." And then it was like the end. So I mean, these were not complicated or nuanced stories in the least, nor did they make very much sense. But I think, when you have those types of experiences with really the types of teachers who really kind of inspire you creatively to just try these things, like, yeah, you're going to write a book, you're in second grade, you could do that. And you come out with this like 10-page thing where you got little stick figures that you drew, and you have, like I said, like nothing fancy or nuanced or even that makes sense, but you have this little story. And I think you just keep reading and you keep writing, and if you're me, then someday I guess you just end up writing poetry and working on a memoir. So that's kind of how I got here.
Oh, that's lovely. Your journey reminded me of my first book, and it was very funny. So I don't want to discuss it. So let's move to you. Okay. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So what type of theme do you usually talk about or discuss in your poems?
Well, so it's kind of interesting from the sense that when I first started writing, um, a lot of it was about my poetry is dark. I mean, that, like, I'll just put that out there. It kind of always has been. Um, I guess for me, poetry is a place where I go to sort of talk about and explore and examine things that, maybe I don't have anybody else that I am talking to about it or want to talk to about it, or that sort of thing. So there was a lot of certainly bad love poems, of the grieving kind, and in fact, some that I hope are not so bad that have made it into either my chapbook or my forthcoming full-length collection, or both. But I think initially it kind of started out as that, and then along the way I had a professor who kind of, because I was writing in grad school specifically, I was writing two kind of sets of poems. One set was about that personal kind of darker stuff. And then this other set, I kind of got inspired by the myth of Medusa. And she's always been a fascinating mythological character to me, especially as a woman, especially as a feminist. that story and its many retellings and the way that it's been reshaped throughout the years and reclaimed throughout the years has always been fascinating to me. And so on the one hand, I've got this personal dark stuff, and on the other hand, I've got these poems where I'm sort of diving into that mythology, but from a more contemporary perspective. And my thesis advisor and mentor, Larissa Sporluck at Bowling Green State in Ohio, I'll never forget it. It was the last day of workshop, and she kind of just like dropped one of those like nuggets. It was like boom, like the very last workshop. She's like, I think for your full length manuscript, eventually you should bring this stuff and interweave it with this stuff. And the fact that it had never occurred to me before was actually also kind of hilarious. But, also the fact that she had more or less, I mean, maybe it just occurred to her at that moment, although I find that hard to believe because she's brilliant. So this was probably something percolating for her all along. And then she just felt like towards the end, like I was finally ready to hear it. I don't know. But anyway, it was hilarious. And she was also right. And as soon as she kind of said that and things sort of clicked in my head, then I started to see how these stories could come together. And so that's sort of how my poetry specifically has evolved. So it started out with like the kind of dark personal stuff. Then I was kind of doing some of that, and then also exploring this retelling of the Medusa myth. And then now finally it's kind of like bringing it all together in this manuscript that really interweaves and fictionalizes as well a lot of this stuff to create a coherent storyline throughout.
Okay, so when did you start submitting to journals?
I think my first submission was like back in, I want to say, it was definitely in undergrad. So this would have been somewhere between 1997 and 2001. And it was definitely before 2001 because I had a couple publications in journals before I graduated. So I want to say I probably submitted something maybe in like 1999 that got accepted in 2000, or in 2000 that got accepted in 2001, but it's somewhere in that. So like 20-ish years ago. So I've been kind of hanging around. I'm, older and doing this for a while.
Okay, so do you remember your first acceptance and your any memories about that you would like to share?
So yeah, so my two first acceptances, and I hope that I'm remembering them as my first acceptances, but I think I did. But as time goes on, your memory kind of gets a little fuzzy, which is why it's very important. I encourage all writers to keep track of things. And I think I've done a decent enough job on my website. But which one exactly came first, I can't say with 100% certainty anymore. I'd have to really go back and dig through materials. But one of them was to a journal that had a contest, and I actually won the contest with a poem. And it wasn't, thank you. I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like, Gettysburg Review or Paris Review or the New Yorker or anything like that. But it was exciting for me. And I felt like that particular piece for that particular journal was an ideal fit. It was definitely a piece that was more of like an emotional type of piece that certainly not most journals just would have no interest in. But this particular journal, it was right up their alley. And so I won the little prize. And so that was a great feeling. And then around that same time, I had also submitted a set of poems to the Northridge Review. So for my last year of undergrad, I graduated from University of Arizona for my undergrad, but I actually did a transfer year, but it was a national transfer. So I spent my last year, my senior year, at Cal State Northridge. And so they had, as a undergraduate writer, you could submit a batch of poems for consideration for the Academy of American Poets Prize within CSUN. So I went ahead and I did that. And I also, it was, I want to say, a 2 or 3-way tie. But I still won. My work was featured. I still got prize money. But I think for me, most importantly, thank you. And this sounds weird, I don't know, but I placed with people, with a writer in particular, whose work I really admired, and we all sort of kind of knew that she was like the best among us. And so it was cool to like, well, I didn't beat her, and believe me, I'm not as good a writer, and I know that. I have no delusions about my abilities, but it was cool to place with her and be like, yeah, like, that was probably like the only moment that my work and hers would ever be held in the same light ever, or ever again. But so that was kind of exciting. Is like, sometimes I think, especially as women, we kind of can feel like a little bit of imposter syndrome. But to stand among stand alongside peers that we admire as an equal, I think is really, it's really important, and it meant something to me. So those are the recollections I have about some of my first publications.
Wow, that's so impressive and fascinating. I mean, congratulations once again, and I really hope that you get to achieve more in life. So, yeah, that's so good. Okay, so my next question to you is, you mentioned in your bio about your MFA. So I want to ask you that how has your MFA helped you improve your writing? And do you think it's necessary for writers to pursue an MFA?
Okay. So I had, it's funny because I think nowadays, especially where there's so much access to information and peers and resources online, I think that it's kind of a different world than it was when I got my MFA, or even started thinking about my MFA. So I waited a significant amount of time before I finally returned to get my MFA, which I will say, I unless you really believe that you're like ready, you're good to go, like you just want to keep plowing forward, and not because you're scared of real life, that's not a valid reason, but because you really have achieved, I think, some higher level in your craft to where jumping into that world or continuing on in academia is going to really just help you kind of keep the momentum going. I think that it's good for those people that want to that are already sort of there and want to just keep going because they're already ready. And sometimes ready, and don't get me wrong, I'm not the one that's going to be judging your work and telling you whether or not you're ready. But I think that there's a component of emotional maturity that is really beneficial when one enters an MFA program specifically. In undergrad, you're kind of like, you're just a number. By and large, you're lucky if you have engagement with maybe 1 or 2 professors who might really take an interest in you, or that you really pursue them as far as office hours and really trying to get sort of like get more out of them than your typical undergraduate student might ask for. But once you're in grad school, there are some dynamics that come up that can be really unhealthy. And if you're not emotionally prepared for that, or kind of equipped mentally, I think it can be a really traumatic experience for people. And that was not the case for me, but I was also older when I went. And I do think that had I gone right after I finished undergrad, I probably would have found some of the things that happened certainly upset me, certainly angered me, but did not traumatize me. And so I think that there's something to be said for, if you're going to go on to that sort of next level or next stage within the world of academia, that you have a little bit of that awareness, because it really is different. For a lot of MFA programs, it's a smaller cohort, and you're really working with just a handful of faculty. So if there are any dynamics between you and a faculty member, or you and that small cohort, you're stuck with that for at least 2 years. And I mean, unless you leave the program, or unless that other person that might be problematic in whatever ways leaves the program. And you can't count on that happening. So it's probably going to be you, or you're going to be miserable trudging through this program, which I don't think is the goal. I would hope that the goal is to just really have a positive experience. But based on what I know from being in academia as a student, as a grad student, and then also working on the other side as an administrator, as a director of communications at one point, among various other roles within academia on the administrative side, I can tell you these dynamics are pervasive and persistent within academia, and it can be very detrimental to writers. So I think that every writer would really benefit from a deep and honest self-exploration as to where they're at on an emotional and mental health level before just diving into an MFA program or a PhD. This also applies for PhD programs, because that's even longer. Before just jumping into it and thinking that everything is going to be hunky-dory, because I most certainly assure you that 100% it will not be. That doesn't mean it won't be a positive experience by and large. It just means that there are going to be problems that you did not anticipate along the way. And some of those may be significant and may affect you as a writer, you as a human being, you as a student, you as a teacher, because often you're asked to teach as part of an MFA program. I think, MFA and PhD programs at this point are necessary if you do want to teach at a college level as far as creative writing goes. So if you don't have a choice and that's your career path, then yeah, go for it. I also think, just like what happened for me, I did the MFA program and actually learned through the MFA program that I did not, in fact, want to teach at that juncture in my life. So the MFA was very helpful from that perspective, because here I thought I knew what my career path was going to be. And then I did it and I thought, no, not right now anyway, not for now. I have the credential if I ever change my mind and want to go back and teach and be part of that academic world. But I don't have to. And right now I'm choosing not to. But that being said, my MFA experience by and large was very positive. And that was because I really thought very hard about what I really wanted from my MFA program. And I really recommend that for anybody who's considering any kind of post-undergrad studies and really any field. I did actually apply for an MFA program, I want to say a couple of years after I graduated from undergrad. And I'm really, really glad that I had gotten into school at Art Institute of Chicago. And I'm really, really glad I didn't go, because I think I know that really ultimately what I needed was to work with female faculty. And that wasn't going to happen in the capacity or to the degree that I experienced at Bowling Green. And I had looked at the school specifically because it was in Chicago and that's where I was born. And, I thought, I'm kind of maybe interested in going back to the Midwest. And once a couple years later, I recalibrated my sort of life goals and my needs and my wants and what my priorities should be or needed to be to have a successful experience by and large through an MFA program. I realized that for me, what I really needed was female faculty. Now, that's not going to be the same for everybody. Other people need different things. Maybe they need a larger cohort. Maybe they need a smaller cohort. Maybe they need to not be physically there because they have kids or they have a job that they're not going to leave. There are all different sorts of needs. but I would encourage everybody looking or interested in pursuing a graduate program to really, really think about what your criteria are and why that criteria is the case. For me, my experience by and large with male professors in writing has not been wholly positive, whereas with female faculty, I think just being able to work with somebody who identifies the way that I do and is open to the kind of work that I do, which is sort of a confessional style, but also a persona. But the bottom line is I use a lot of the I, the first person pronoun. And a lot of non-female professors tend to read that as autobiographical because I'm a woman, and that's not accurate. So already you have a professor who's in a position of power, who's trying to guide you or intends to guide you, and doesn't already has a bias on what your work is without even really understanding or asking these important questions. Whereas with women, fellow women, I have not had that same experience. So I knew for me, working on doing the kind of work that I do, that I really wanted to work with female faculty. And at the time, Bowling Green had the two primary female faculty in poetry were women. And so that was a good fit for me. And specifically with Larissa, I could not imagine a better faculty, mentor, advisor. She was exactly what I needed at that time. And certainly the book that's coming out next year it just wouldn't exist without her. I mean, I had other people telling me to stop writing it, and that's while I was in grad school. So hence why I say you really have to kind of be mentally and emotionally prepared for that, because there will be people, for whatever reason, that tell you certain things about your work, and you have to be strong enough in your own ethic and within yourself to know who to listen to and who to just completely ignore. And I think that that's one of the valuable things that I got out of the program. I think the other thing that I definitely want to touch on with respect to programs is one thing that I learned, because they're always talking about finding your voice. Programs, I think, want to teach you what your voice is. And I actually found that the opposite is actually true, at least in my case. So I found in workshop, people people trying to tell me, oh no, don't focus on that. Oh no, don't do this, or try this different, or do this different. And it's like, okay, well, that's all interesting feedback. I'm just going to do this over here. So it's almost as if, and then once I graduated, then I really feel like, okay, I can really embrace fully what I want to do, and I'm going to do just that. Thank you. And I encourage everybody else to do the same thing. It's very freeing, and that's sort of when you find, I think you find your voice not so much by following. I mean, I think other people have good feedback and good insights. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I took everything that people gave me and just said, oh, to heck with this. But I think that it's important, again, to kind of have a sort of an inner sense, even if you don't know 100% like where you're going with something, or, again, what that sense of, well, what is my voice, and what is my path in this world of poetry or fiction or nonfiction or what have you. There's something just inside you as a creator that just sort of knows when something resonates, when somebody says something about your work that's like when I knew when Larissa said, you need to bring these two things together, and it was like the light bulb went off. It's like, of course I do. Absolutely, 100%. I don't know how I didn't see it before, but thank you for telling me, because I certainly didn't. And it made sense. It resonated. Those types of moments, I think, listen to those, and then you find your voice through those. You find your voice through working and through heeding those moments that where somebody says something to you and it's just like, yes, that's it. That's exactly it. Yes. And then the rest of it, it's garbage. It's just garbage. Forget it. It's not the people, but just forget it. They have good intentions, but they might just not understand where you're going. And that's very, very easy to do in a grad program or really any program, because most of the time when you're in the program, you are actually working towards finding the thing. So how is somebody else going to know what your thing is? They don't even know what their thing is, and vice versa. So again, when somebody hits on something that just sort of resonates, take that nugget. It's a blessing from the universe, and then run with it. And that, I think, is, you know, how maybe an MFA program can help you find your voice. But ultimately, it's still you find your voice. Okay, I've really rambled.
No, actually, it's actually very, very important that you just said that, you know, it's very important for you to analyze and realize like what's your own voice and find it. I mean, you are the one who is going to find it. I mean, people can help you, and, you know, but not everybody, whatever everybody's saying is something that you can, you know, apply or implement into your work. So it's very, very important. You know, I as a writer, I was struggling too with a couple of these things. So it's very, very inspiring what you just said. I'm even going to quote it on my Facebook, and, you know, it's very important. It's very
Oh,
important.
thank you.
Also, with regards to that, I want to ask you another question that personally I feel I get stuck at. It is that, what do you think, in your opinion, is more important when it comes to writing poetry? Like, if somebody is not a formal writer, formally trained as a writer, then if somebody is writing with raw emotions, and, you know, there is no you know, what, how should I, you know, put it, there is no the person doesn't have a lot of you know, academic sense, or putting a lot of you know, academic thought into his or her work, but writing from the soul, writing from the heart. So what do you think, in your opinion, matters the most? I mean, there should be a balance between the two, or you know, or a person should be you know, trained before writing, or, you know, go about by just writing the way the person is writing currently. What do you think about that?
You know, I think it depends on what your goals are. So again, for me, I pursued an MFA because I really thought that I was going to teach at a college level, and that was going to be my career path. And so that was just the necessary step or next step for me. And so when you're thinking about that, then you sort of, you already know that you're sort of within a world where a certain type or style of writing is more or less necessary. And that's where that kind of push and pull and sort of tug of war between your voice and what you think you need to write or how you want to write kind of gets that tension from the academic world. And here's the canon, which probably doesn't include a lot of people who look like you, right? And you know, doesn't include a lot of women, and doesn't include a lot of people of color, and doesn't include a lot of people who aren't heterosexual, et cetera, et cetera. Certainly doesn't include a lot of people who aren't middle to high class, right, with higher incomes and all of this stuff, people who could traditionally afford academia. And so if your intention is to go into that world of teaching, that world of academia, then yeah, you're probably going to have to, at the very least, educate yourself on that canon, as annoying as that is, and frankly kind of a waste of time. But you're going to have that same frame of reference as the people that you're working with and the people who you more or less have to appease in order to get these jobs, if that is your goal. On the other hand, if you just love writing and you just want to write and you don't really care necessarily about getting recognized by academia, having a job in academia, getting published in journals, or any kind of even performance. You just write whatever you want. I mean, that's probably the most freeing type of writing that you could possibly do, because there really are no constraints. You don't have to do anything for anyone within this type of writing if that's the direction you want to go. Write what makes you happy, and that's your writing life. Now, on the other hand, if you're somewhere in between where, maybe you don't want to teach, but you are interested in publication, then I think it behooves you to study the types of publications that you're interested in getting your work put in, so that at the very least you have a sense of what these particular publications are looking for. And if you are so inclined, again, because there are different goals with these types of writing, and I think it's important to understand what your goal is before you sort of embark on whatever journey you plan to take, because there's space for all of this type of writing. There's space for the type of writing that you do so you can become Professor XYZ at Harvard University or what have you, right? And you can write towards that. I don't know about you finding your voice, but you can write towards that. It can be done. It has been done. It is done. It is being done. On the other hand, if you're just all about, I'm just doing this type of writing, then you can go in that direction, and you can be that type of writer and find fulfillment that way. And then if you're, again, if you're somewhere in the middle where, maybe I want to publish in journals, but I'm not so much concerned about the academia, you can somewhat tailor your work, or because this could be a combo effort. You find those outlets that look specifically for that type of work. So like I was talking about one of my initial publications, where I knew this sort of like emo poem was like going to be a really good fit for this particular place, because that's what they published. So I already knew that something I wrote that I wanted to write that really wasn't, I think, influenced by like the outside forces, or like, gee, I really need to get this published in, Paris Review or whatever. Or gee, I really need to get into this MFA program. You have something that matches what a journal is already looking for. So it's kind of like a great fit all the way around, because you didn't have to necessarily tailor it towards a certain aesthetic, nor did they feel like they had to give you edits or whatever to make it fit their journal's aesthetic. It was just a good fit. And so you kind of made the match, and that's great. If you're hell-bent on getting published by a certain journal, you're going to have to, especially if it's one of those higher tier, top tier type of journals, you're going to have to write towards that. Some people, it comes more naturally to, it's of more interest to them, and maybe in some ways it does align with the voice that they have honed over the years, and maybe it doesn't. I feel like different journals have different voices, but I do think that a lot of the top tier journals, nothing against them, but the voices are very homogenized, and unsurprisingly, mostly male. And so if that's your goal, then just understand then that what you might be working towards, and the sacrifices that you may have to make if that is your goal. Your goal is no longer about maintaining your voice under all circumstances necessarily. It becomes maybe I need to tailor a piece specifically towards a journal, and really there's nothing wrong with that. I hope I'm not in kind of explaining it in this way, which is just my perspective and my opinion. It doesn't make it bad writing, or like you're a bad writer because you've tailored a piece to a journal that you admire and you just want your work in that journal. There's nothing wrong with that goal. There's nothing wrong with tailoring a piece to a journal's aesthetic. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. All I'm suggesting is that it may not align with your natural voice, and that's okay if that's your goal. That's it.
Wow, I would honestly request you to give a TED talk or something because I'm feeling so inspired after talking to you. I was actually feeling a little sluggish before the interview, and I'm feeling so charged up because of you. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, now I want to talk to you about your chapbook. So your debut chapbook, Head of a Gorgon, is forthcoming with Vegetarian Alcoholic Press in 2022. So congratulations on that. And would you like to talk about the collection and what type of work does it contain?
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I answer the correct question. So my chapbook is already out, and that one is an animal I can't name. So that one's already out. And then my debut full-length collection, Head of a Gorgon, is coming out in 2022. So did you want me to talk about the chapbook that's already out or the full-length collection that's forthcoming?
Anything that you would like to talk about, it's up to you. Whatever you want to talk about, any of your either of the books.
Okay. Um, well, for me, since grad school, starting in grad school and then moving past grad school to kind of get to the full length collection that's coming out next year with Vegetarian Alcoholic Press. It's interesting because it's more than a decade's worth of a journey from my first Medusa poems in grad school, and then bringing in some more personal and older poems, and then kind of doing this sort of intermelding of fact and myth, fiction and sort of not quite memory, not quite memoir, but just something that's true-ish, I guess I'll say. So it's not quite fiction, but in some things are totally wholly fiction. Some things are true. And then how do you kind of marry these things together to make it all feel true? Which is for me the ultimate goal with both of my collections is I'm telling you some true things that maybe happened to me, and I'm telling you some things that didn't happen to me, but I want you to feel that they all happened to a person. And I want you to experience that as your own experience. So as I was working towards the full-length collection, I sort of realized, because of the nature of the story that I'm telling, where it's basically an exploration or reinvention of the myth of Medusa in contemporary times from a feminist perspective. And it's a very short novel in verse if one were to categorize it as such, but it does have that sort of feel where there's a beginning, middle, and end. I mean, that probably comes from the fact that I actually in undergrad started off writing fiction and found that I actually didn't want to tell fiction per se. So that I think is how I started getting into poetry, but I wasn't telling holy truth there either. So then it was kind of like this weird, mishmash. It's always been this mishmash for me of, am I telling you something that really happened or am I not? But the goal again is to always make it feel like this happened, whether it happened in real life or the imagination or both. That's still the goal, is to make the reader feel as if this is a real experience and you are also experiencing the emotion around that experience. But as I was going along, I kind of realized, because there's the beginning, middle, and end, I could kind of take this chunk right here and maybe make it stand alone. And that's how the chapbook came to pass. So in fact, I knew that I wanted to have this full-length collection, and I knew that I knew more or less what the full-length collection would entail, but I actually achieved the chapbook first along the way as sort of a subsection of what ultimately became my full-length collection. So there are some poems that don't appear in the full-length collection. That needed to kind of be put in there to make the chapbook, the smaller thing, make sense on its own without this larger, broader story. But then so it's like building in that new connective tissue that then can be discarded once you have the larger story. But then taking these poems sort of like almost out of context a little bit and saying, oh, how can I kind of maybe reorder them or think about how they might play differently against each other within a smaller framework to create a chapbook. So I like to get as much mileage out of my work as I possibly can, because for me, I'm not a prolific writer. That's not my goal. And that's just like, I write things that I feel I need to say, reflections on things that, I've experienced, whether truly in my own life or through someone else or emotionally. I try to communicate, I guess, what I feel to be essential in life as far as like life lessons are concerned. And I kind of just walk away from the rest. I'd rather read somebody else feel passionate about it than write about it myself. Like, it's really got to grip me. It's got to feel really urgent and really necessary for me to spend time writing about it. Otherwise, I'd rather read about it. And there are plenty of other people doing great writing about the things that I'm interested in, but it just doesn't grip me the way that the stories that I'm sharing in my chapbook, in my full-length collection, and in my memoir do. So again, I try to get the most mileage out of my work. So I try to get, as many poems out of my books published in individual journals and get exposure that way. Then I thought, wow, I could do a chapbook, using some of the poems from the full length. And so that's what I did. And so that kind of was a larger introduction for me that people could have to my work. And so if you read my chapbook and you're like, wow, intriguing, like I would like to see where this goes, then yes, please think about, getting the full length collection. Because this is all within that same framework. I'm just not the kind, like, I'm not one of these writers where like, okay, this is one book and it's like wildly different from like anything else, like the thing I did before, the thing I'm going to do after. I'm just not that person, at least not at this point in my career. And I'm cool with that. Like, again, it really just depends on your goals as a writer. I don't need to be like, Miss Experimental Innovator in the land of poetry. No, that's just not my goal. Like, I want to tell stories that are important to me. And once those stories are done being told, I'm good. Like, that's fine.
Wow, that's so cool. I mean, wow. I mean, you said it all.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to ask you that, if anybody wants to buy your books, so where they can buy them, especially an animal I can't name, and then the one that's, coming out in 2022. So where are they available?
Sure. So right now you can purchase the chapbook, An Animal I Can't Name. You can contact me directly at any time. There's a little contact me page at my website, which is RaegenMP@wordpress.com. And I'm going to spell that because my name is spelled funky. Thank you, parents, again, for interesting names. So there you go. It's RAEGEN, M as in Mary, P as in Peter. So my middle initial is M and my last initial is P, at wordpress.com. Or no, RaegenMP.wordpress.com. But that's how you spell my name, RAEGEN and then MP. It can also be purchased through the original publisher, Two of Cups Press. So if you go to their storefront, you can publish it that way as well. So I have some copies you can get through me if you're interested, like if you want it signed. If you just want a copy and check it out and you really don't care about autographs and things like that, which is totally fine as well. Or if you just prefer to support the small press directly, which Two of Cups is a wonderful press, and I had a terrific experience working with their publisher, Leanne Hornfeld, then I encourage you to do so. And that again is just the storefront at twoofcupspress.com, I believe is the website. But all you have to do is TWO, it's spelled out, Two of Cups, like the tarot card. So you can get it that way. And then as far as my forthcoming collection, there will be a pre-order sometime in early 2022. The book officially comes out in May of that year. So you can go to Vegetarian Alcoholic Press's website and you can do the pre-order. Or again, you can simply reach out to me on my website. One way or another, either me or Freddie LaForce, the publisher at Vegetarian Alcoholic Press, will take care of you. So rest assured, if you really want that book, whichever book it is, one of us is going to get it to you, and we're going to be so thrilled to make sure that you get the work.
So now I want to ask you that, request you actually. So if you have any poem that you would like to, you have written from your collection, or from any journal that you have written and you would like to share, then please feel free.
Oh, okay. I actually have like this stack of books because I wasn't quite sure what you were going to ask me, and so like I have like, I'm like, well, she asked me about this poet, then I'm going to grab this book and be like, oh yeah, this poem. Or if she asked me about this, or like, but I put the chapbook. Here's the chapbook, An Animal I Can't Name. A wonderful artwork, by the way, by a colleague and friend, Lisa Sills. She actually created this whole thing. It's original art that she created specifically after reading my book. So it was like,
wow, this is so cool.
Yeah, and just a really cool piece. And she's a fantastic artist. But I just had, every time I look at it, it's just like, oh, Lisa. And I just get so excited. But anyway, I did put it here because like I said, I wasn't quite sure what you might ask. But let's see. I'm going to try to make this not. So again, I feel like, honestly, I just need to come with a trigger warning for people. Trigger warnings were not a thing when, I was in programs and in school, and now they are. But again, I just feel like I never know all I know is my work is dark. I don't know necessarily, some things are obvious, but I don't necessarily know what might be triggering for somebody. So I'm going to just do a blanket of, this may trigger you. And if so, I'm sorry. And that I can't be more specific. This particular poem I'm going to read, I think is less triggering. And that's why I just picked it. Cause I was like, that might be a little too much, but just understand that there are resources out there for you. And certainly if you have any questions, I also generally keep a list of resources too. So if something I read and hear triggers something and you don't know where to turn, please feel free to reach out. Like I said, I picked a poem that I don't think is too triggering, but I just generally tell people my work may be triggering because people get triggered by a variety of different things. So this poem is called The Spring Before Leaving Father. And this one, if I recall correctly, in its original form was published, let me just verify. This one was originally published in Cimarron Review. So this is The Spring Before Leaving Father. Was winter cold and wet, and my damp hair froze at its tips as I stood at the bus stop. Father marched from the house across our singed brown yard, hat in hand, and yanked it down around my head. Summer, I'd lure young damselflies into sleeping jars trimmed with drunk cotton. Their tails bounced and stuck together, blue and green, teasing me neon until the next morning when I'd run to catch more. I avoided the dragonflies after one tied knots in my hair, spit out hum sounds till it settled dead in a warm tangled nest Father had to cut from my head. When I scaled our yard's maple, Father shouted from the open door, "That's work for dirty boys." And if I didn't come down, he would strike my shins with a switch. Once inside, he'd scrub my hands raw, tell me leaves change color because water means to empty these veins, because they were dying, which is why I had to abandon them. Remember this lesson. Just before the sun came and the dirt could thaw, recall how to reclaim. Snow turned the world to a skeleton. Months in the house with suspicion stuck in my head, betraying me, creaking like the floor beneath me, leading towards a cracked door, another forbidden, frozen surface, father's face staring into his emptied glass.
Wow, I have no words. It's incredible.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are reaching the end of the interview. So my last question to you is, what are your goals for your writing career?
Currently?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the biggest goals was to get the full length collection published and to find a home for it. And I'm so grateful to Freddie and to Vegetarian Alcoholic Press for that opportunity. And Freddie's just pretty cool so far. And you know, I've read just horror stories about people just having really terrible experiences with publishers. And nobody should have to do that. Not after the blood, sweat, and tears that are in, and just the angst that goes into actually creating your work. It shouldn't be angsty publishing it. Like, that should be, I think, the most joyous part of it, because man, you've just run the literary marathon. Like, that part should be the least of your problems, right? You already suffered the trauma of having to write this thing. So now you should be reaping the benefits and experiencing the joy. That being said, I'm currently traumatizing myself by writing my memoir. I'm currently on chapter 17. I had started this, probably a decade ago as well. But I wanted to refocus and then I stopped working on that, refocus my attention back on the poetry manuscript, so that I could finally get that done and get that out there in the world. But now I've circled back to the memoir and I've really been going hardcore on that. So my goal, I guess, is to, finish that, get that done. I mean, because this is just the draft stage and I'm already, I want to say at least 150 pages, if not more. And I know, just because when you're reading your own work, you're like, oh my God, like this, there's so much left to be done. Like, there's still so much, to do. And I'm already at this page count, and I know I still have 10 more chapters to draft, let alone then return and revise and really build out more what each chapter needs to be and the parts of the story that need to be there. So it's a lot. I didn't know that I was going to write this book until I knew. I mean, it's like, I didn't know until the thing in my life happened to me. And then I was like, yeah, this is one of those stories that's just so compelling and gripping to me that I feel like I can help other people by telling it. And so I'm going to do that, no matter how painful it is for me, no matter how long it takes. I hope it does not take over a decade like my poetry collection. It may. But my current goal is to get that drafted and to get it revised and to get it published. And then maybe I can be done. Like, I know that's not really how most writers feel, but I'm not most writers. And that's how I feel. I feel like there are just a couple stories in my life that, again, reach that level of I need to be the one telling this particular story. And which is not to say other people can tell that story too, but it's going to be their version and mine's going to be mine. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I never thought of a writerly goal as potentially being, I just want to be finished with my writerly goals. But I think maybe it is. So for me, again, I know that might sound strange. I will always love writing. I will always love everything, reading, editing, all of that stuff. And I do plan to do that the rest of my life in some capacity. I just don't know that I need to or want to create in that realm, whether it's like poetry, fiction, in the literary sense. I don't know that I want or need to do that once I'm done with my memoir. But we'll see. I mean, something else might happen that's super compelling that I just feel I need to tell the story, and then maybe I tell it in a different way. I didn't necessarily think that I would bounce from poetry into prose, but here I am. and so I'm open to that, whatever happens along my journey. But for now, the goal is get this memoir done, get it polished, get it published, and then maybe I can be done with that creative part of my journey. And then maybe not. Maybe something else happens, and then I have to write about that, and then that'll be the next goal.
Okay, so let's just end it. Okay, so guys, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you want to connect with Raegen, so she has mentioned her website link. So it's RAEGEN, M for Mary, P for Peter, .wordpress.com. And on Twitter, you can find her at Free Radical RP.